So I feel very blessed to work with the adult population. I've worked in both with adults and pediatrics in the past, but certainly saw there was such a huge need for strong advocates, especially within our older population group, as often they tend to be the ones who don't get the support. Children tend to get what they need very easily, while adults, it's a bit more of a battle. So I've been doing this for a wee while. I've been working with the Northern Cochlear Implant Program, now based at the Hearing House, for about 15 years, and we currently have close to 1,000 people that we're supporting, so a small program compared to others, but that does allow us to be very individual in our care, which I feel really lucky to be able to do. So we feel very strongly, as Roxana talked about, that individual care is the key, especially when working with this older population. So the oldest client that we've actually implanted in our program was 95 years old, and she was quite a superstar. So I think the one thing to take away is you're never too old, and I 100% agree with Kathy. The earlier you can jump into it, the better. So a quick look at our demographics. I've been doing this for a while now, and there is no doubt that the age of our clients are getting older. It happens. It happens to us all. But we're also finding that the age at referral is also increasing. So you can see this is the age of people referred to our service this financial year, and we certainly do have a very large proportion. Over half of the clients referred are over age 65, and actually about 1/3 of our population are over the age 75 level. So that's really important to be aware of, and it has changed our program quite dramatically over the years. But if you just do a quick click on the button there, I guess the big question for me is, does it really matter? And I think that's something that we always come back to is, does it really matter if we actually have a population that's aging? Does it affect our cochlear implant outcomes? So next slide. And this is just a very quick, very short overview of the speech changes that we see within 3 months. I can tell you there's no significant difference between any of our age groups. And if anything, when you have a look at this graph, our over 75s seem to be doing better than our younger clients. And I'll talk a little bit about why. The other thing that I really want to emphasise is across all of our age groups, we see the same significant improvements in quality of life. So in our program, we measure quality of life outcomes before and after the cochlear implant. So when we're talking about a quality of life, I'm talking about the change that occurs in how a person is interacting with their community, with their family, with their society. And regardless of the age, we actually see significant improvements in quality of life. We also see significant improvement. Oh, can you go back? We also see significant improvements in our mental health measures. So in our program, we also do screening tests for anxiety and depression, actually all the way through a person's journey from the time we first meet them, and every time we see them, we do just a quick touch base to see how they're going. And it's just because the reality of the people that we work with is when they come into our program, they have a very significant communication challenge because of their hearing loss. And when you have a communication challenge, often you have relationship breakdowns, whether you like it or not. It becomes much more challenging to maintain a good relationship with those that you care about, and that can have a really big impact on how people feel about life. So most of the people we work with when they come into our program have anxiety and depression levels that would be at a clinically significant level that should be referred into mental health services. And for us, the real exciting thing as an audiologist is seen over that 3 months when we're supporting people through their journey is a very quick drop in levels of anxiety and depression. So talking about that whole person is a really important part of that picture. So now we can go to the next slide. So the big question is, what does affect outcomes? So this is just a very quick snapshot of 2 of our clients that we work with. Both are 83-year-old 83 years old at switch on. Both clients have been profoundly deaf for 10 years prior to cochlear implant. Their actual education history, everything else was incredibly similar. The only difference was that client number one had a past history of stroke and the other client had no other health issues. So first of all, I want to say this is only a snapshot of a year. Both clients report significant improvements in their quality of life. So even though you think client number one, their speech outcomes have not changed dramatically, what we find is that their quality of life has improved significantly because of their access to sound generally, because this is just a picture of speech. And also, that person who's had the stroke, we continue to see changes over the next 3 years. So while their journey is different, their journey still has just as much value. And I think for me, the biggest thing for us to be mindful of, and this is again a really big reason why we want people to be coming in and talking about cochlear implants earlier rather than later. And if you just press the button, is that what we do find the biggest impact on how quickly a person adapts to a cochlear implant and how far they go along on the journey is something we call comorbidities. And that's a really, really big word just to say a person who has multiple health issues at the same time. So we do see people who are deaf, they are blind, they maybe have cognitive changes, they can have a lot in that package, and that does make the journey harder. Doesn't mean that it's less significant or that they don't get there, but it is certainly more difficult. And that's a big reason why that first slide that you saw, actually our over 75s this year seem to do better than our younger group, because this year our younger population had higher levels of comorbidities than our older population did. So age is not actually the key, it's how well you are when you come into the journey. So the next slide. Okay, so I'm moving through these really quickly, sorry. So for me, the considerations, there are so many amazing things that I'll talk about when it comes to supporting our older population, but we can't forget the things that are hard, because it does change how we develop our programs quite significantly. And that's one thing I would say, is that we have changed how our program supports our older population over the last 15 years, just because we are getting to that point that our clients are needing a lot more support, and life is different. We find that regardless of that dementia or cognition prevention that hearing provides, whether we like it or not, our processing of information does change as we get older. So we do see our older population having changes in cognition, and their communication style changes as well. We find that we're needing to spend more time to support them with new technology, and that's something as a program that we have to devote that time for. We're seeing population who has changes in their dexterity, and whether we like it or not, we are dealing with equipment that is becoming increasingly small. Yes, it's often rechargeable, but it can be a challenge managing that equipment. So when you're working with this population, we're finding that for our under 65s, once they're actually up and running, it tends to just be keeping an eye on things every 2-3 years. But with our older population, we do need to see them a lot more frequently. And as a program, it's something to be really mindful of, because we want to make sure that our older population actually succeed and fly with a cochlear implant. We see a lot more people dealing with chronic pain. And when you're dealing with chronic pain and fatigue, the challenge is your energy is a bit more dispersed, sorry. So your energy is a bit more dispersed between listening and communicating and actually having to deal with the other health issues that you've got. I hate to say it, but a lack of family support does tend to come along with our older population. And that can be due to lots of different issues. We have children who are having to support their own children as well as their parents. So the amount of time that they have to support an elder parent is less. We have clients who do have dementia or Alzheimer's who are struggling with changes in their behaviour and their personality. And often it's very easy for family members to walk away rather than step up. So as a program, we find that we need to step up a lot more than we do for our younger population. Because of changes in mobility, we do see decreased social interactions. And that also can have a really big impact on how much speech access a person has. So we often talk in audiology about success with a cochlear implant being really related to the amount of interactions that you have during the day. And it's one of the really fascinating things that I find in New Zealand is we have very diverse populations, as most countries do, but actually the populations that do the best with a cochlear implant are our Indigenous and our Pacifica populations, with the main difference being that family and social interactions are so intertwined in their day-to-day life. The populations that actually we struggle with most are our Pākehā, our European population, who tend to be more isolated in New Zealand. So decreasing social interactions have a really big impact on outcomes with a cochlear implant. So that's something that as a program, again, we've had to work really hard on. And we do social groups, the ability to come in and do some crafting or come in and just have a cup of tea. And that's made a really big difference to actually maintaining those links within the cochlear implant community and trying to keep people as interacted as possible. So if we go on to the next slide. So we've talked enough about what's hard. I really like to focus on the amazing things. So for me as an audiologist, the thing I absolutely love about working with the older population, first of all, let's face it, the stories are so much better when you're talking to somebody who's older. The lived experiences, the thoughts, the ideas, you get to have so many more fascinating conversations that really challenge your viewpoint on aging. So for me, that's a real amazing thing to experience. So any audiologists online who are not necessarily working with this population, definitely encourage it because it is so rewarding. The challenge, I've been doing audiology for a wee while now, and this is the population that is bringing the most challenge with the programming, with the support that's needed. It's amazing as a clinician to have to be on your toes all the time because often you're having to do things very differently. You're having to teach different things and different concepts constantly. We're dealing with a technology that is constantly changing and a population who may not always be as comfortable dealing with the technology. The connection. We have so many more times that we interact with our older population because of changing needs. So the relationship that you develop with our older population is just phenomenal. And I've had clients who I've been supporting for 30 years, and they're now coming to that stage where they are in their 80s and 90s and needing a very different sort of an interaction. I know my team feels very blessed that often we are asked to come in at end of life to make sure that equipment is working because people understand that whole concept that at end of life, that hearing is the last sense to go. So for us, that connection is just phenomenal, and we feel so blessed to be part of that. And I think for as an audiologist, it's one of those really amazing experiences that you get to have, is that connection with the people you work with. And of course, let's face it, the impact. It's not just about your ability to hear speech. It's about the changes. It's about seeing our older people who were very isolated going out to their local Probus meeting, going out and catching up with family when they wouldn't have done so in the past. It's actually about seeing them take back that independence. Many of the people who walk into our doors have already had everything taken away. Family members through the best intentions have taken over so many aspects of that person's life that they are no longer making their own choices about their autonomy, about what they want to get out of aging in the future. So seeing people actually take that power back and be able to advocate for themselves, to be able to say to bank managers, medical professionals, what is important to them is just phenomenal. Seeing their mental health changes is just amazing. So for me, looking at the impact of actually providing cochlear implants for our older population is just so undervalued.